So, Andy, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to reconnect after all these years.
Absolutely. So, I'm going to start off with an easy question, and it's a question that we ask all of our guests. And it is, what made you become a lawyer in the first place?
It was really just an interest in the legal process, being able to sort of get involved in an area that was completely unique. None of my family had ever gone to law school or had been lawyers in the past, so it was kind of a new field. I was interested in it from a very early age, along with history, and decided there wasn't so much money in being a history professor, so law was the way to go. And since I went in there, it's become more interesting almost by the year. Beginning to never regretted the choice, and I've really begun to see some interesting aspects of the legal profession. It's been a great ride.
And you've had quite an interesting journey because we met, I don't want to say how many years ago now because it makes me sound old, but back in London. And I know that you're now based in Houston. So can you tell us a bit about your career and where it's taken you?
I was in London. I was actually a trainee at a firm called Herbert Smith, which many folks may have heard of over there, and along with you, obviously, Claire, and really loved practicing in London. But for personal reasons, wanted to move back to the United States or move to the United States. I'd lived here previously and decided I would move back. The obvious place to go from London was New York. So I practiced in New York for many years with Simpson Thacher, and then moved down to Houston actually with Simpson to open their Houston office. I then moved to Kirkland to open their sort of competing Houston office in April of 2014, and I've been at Kirkland ever since. So I've kind of moved around a little bit, but I would say early on my main focus was on M&A, and then it really became energy as a focus, which made the move to Houston somewhat logical from a location perspective.
And having practiced both in the UK and the US, I wonder if you could give me some reflections on, first of all, what you think firms in the UK could learn from firms in the US.
I think the biggest firms in both countries are actually a lot more similar than people realize. Obviously, they've developed in different ways, but I think they're converging on a similar path, which is really focusing on high margin work. Looking to excel in the areas in which they're sort of focused on, and not trying to be kind of a jack of all trades across the board. Whatever the UK firms could learn from the US and vice versa, I think they're already learning those lessons and they've been implementing them for many years. And I think my guess is if I was to come back and practice law in London now, the magic circle would be unrecognizable from where it was when I was in London previously.
And you mentioned moving closer together there, and I'm going to use that as a segue into 2020 because I think this has been a year where, ironically, actually, with international travel being closed down, it's been a year where everyone has shared the same experience in COVID and the pandemic. So I just wanted to get your reflections from being over in the US on how that's impacted your firm, what you've done differently this year.
The obvious thing is we've all worked from home from pretty much March on. I also think it's caused us to reevaluate pretty much everything in terms of business development, in terms of how we approach things. Prior to the pandemic, I would say in my case, I was probably on an airplane 4 days a week. Now, I don't think I've flown since March of this year. So it's really changed things from that perspective. And that doesn't mean that we haven't been doing business development and looking to get new clients. It just means we've been doing it differently. So we've done it through Zoom sessions or through, other forms of contact over the phone, etc. What we're proudest of during all of this is the way that our attorneys have reacted to the changes, and they've really gone the extra mile and really shown themselves to be fantastically adaptable to a new situation, and particularly a situation where they could have a lot more going on than legal work. They could have obviously significant impact from the virus itself. The first thing we've stressed all along is that health and safety comes first. We'd rather they focus on their own health and their family's health before they think about legal work.
And one of the things that I've been talking to some guests about is how the ability to work remotely is also going to change the way that we think about talent. So, you're perhaps a good example of that, where you were in London, so you worked in the city, then went to New York, so you worked for a firm that was based in New York. You then moved to Houston, and so you've kind of found work where you are, but working remotely gives people the opportunity, obviously, to hire regardless of where people are. Do you think that's going to be something that you're going to see?
Yeah, possibly. Look, as I say, there are still some issues with being completely remote. The obvious one is, your first couple of years in a law firm, as you well know, a lot of your learning process is really learning by osmosis. You're sitting in the room, you're hearing more senior lawyers on the phone, how they conduct themselves, how they approach issues, how they sort of move forward. And I would say, the first 6 months in any law firm is really about learning to be in an office. It's learning to be part of a team. It's learning to be a practicing lawyer. And I think that part of it is very difficult to instill remotely. Anyone that says they've got a complete command of how you're going to do that without face-to-face contact, I think is probably not being realistic or honest about it. I think we'll all puzzle through that over the coming years as to whether that's doable. So those are issues with it, and that's the one piece that would prevent me from saying, yeah, you can go hire someone in Edinburgh, Scotland, to do legal work for folks, and for an office based in London or Texas or wherever else. Setting aside, of course, the national bar laws and the state bar laws in the US, which would prevent necessarily hiring lawyers from anywhere. I think that the other sort of gating mechanism on that would be basically effective training, and the clients want to know that you're effectively going to train your lawyers to the standard they expect to basically be working at a marquee firm.
Reflecting on what you've said there, the challenge with giving kind of the junior members of the team that ability to learn by osmosis. Actually, you're at a point in your life, thinking back when I was a trainee, where you didn't have any other family responsibilities, or actually your friendship groups are formed in the office. But when you're at the other end, you've mentioned it yourself, you're able to have dinner with your kids, but you're the people that need to be in the office to provide that learning experience. So it'll be interesting to see how firms respond to that.
Yeah, and the issue of isolation is real. I think we had a couple of folks that joined us right before the pandemic started. They came from other firms, they weren't coming in as junior associates, and even sort of those more senior folks. A couple of them picked up the phone to me and said, it really is tough psychologically to basically have your only contact really be at the end of a phone, a phone call. Most of the time, if they had any contact, it was over the phone, and of course they didn't really know people that well at their new firm, so it was tough for them to sort of build those bridges that you would normally have built with new colleagues. So we've done a number of things to try and fix that, and we're working on it. And I do think it is possible to move firms, during these times, obviously. But it's tough. There is an isolation aspect there, and I think that would be the thing I'd be most concerned about, particularly with brand new first years coming in, where it's such a steep learning curve to begin with, and it's such an intimidating thing to walk into a law firm. It's something that we will really have to manage if the work from home environment continues.
And you've mentioned there that you have tried a few things. Is there anything that you think you've done that's worked really well that you'd like to share?
Nothing that's really rocket science. I mean, we've had sort of regular Zoom calls where we'll just get everybody on the phone for an update about how the firm and the office are, how the office is doing, how the firm is doing. We've tried sort of having regular emails that go around that basically sort of show if someone gets new pets, for example, they'll have pictures of their new dog, and there's a good sort of group going around. We'll do charity events where we'll have sort of charity auctions over email. I'm always telling the attorneys, if you've got any great ideas, let me know, and I'd love to do it, because sort of having that integration and that tight knit team is huge.
And you've mentioned a few things there that kind of struck me as bringing the human in. And I think that one of the things with working from home is you do open up your lives in a way that you perhaps wouldn't do if you were in the office. I wonder how that's translating with clients. So are you finding your interactions with clients have changed, and how are you responding?
Not so much, but I think that's because in many cases, many of my clients were people that I grew up with. They were, we sort of started really from a private equity perspective. We've now moved into more strategic work, but it was originally it was mainly a PE client base, and they were sort of growing up in at the same time I was as an associate, and I think that was the case for a lot of the folks that I work with, a lot of the partners certainly in our office, and I think generally at the firm. So many of them were friends before this, and folks that I would text with, or I would call, or I'd chat to, and not necessarily about work. We'd sort of occasionally would get together with families, etc. So I sort of had that degree of that with many of my clients to begin with. The sort of newer clients, or the ones that we've gained through the pandemic, we really haven't noticed much of a difference, other than the fact that maybe you're jumping on video conferences with them, and maybe their dog will be barking in the background, or a kid will run in the middle of the video conference. Other than that, we really haven't seen much of a difference in communication.
And I mean, in terms of the US, I think the US has been kind of in the spotlight of the world this year with COVID, but with, I think that's put everyone in the spotlight. But, obviously you've had the elections, and you've also had the Black Lives Matter movement this year. So it's been, an enormous year of change for the US. I was wondering how your firm has responded to that change.
What we're trying to do is make sure that we're providing a fantastic platform for all of our diverse attorneys to have the best career possible. And we've implemented a number of things internally to hopefully, achieve that. So we obviously made a huge charitable commitment. We made $5 million available to diverse causes, causes that were aimed at promoting equality. And the response has been overwhelming. But the money side of it's almost the easy side. The more important side is basically making our attorneys feel as though they have a great career at Kirkland, and we will promote diversity throughout our organisation. We really have focused from the very highest level, including from our chairman down, on ensuring that it's an absolute bedrock principle of the firm. The final thing we've tried to do is obviously make the place a safe space for ideas, and a safe space for our attorneys to sort of let us know, what they need to progress their careers, and how we can improve.
And I love that idea of kind of a safe space for ideas, because that for me is really key to be able to encourage ideas from all quarters. And you've mentioned it obviously in the context now of diversity, but you mentioned it earlier as well when you were talking about isolation and in a different context. How do you create that safe space?
Yeah, so I don't want to pretend we've got all the answers, because we don't. We're continually trying to get there, and also just create a culture where folks are not afraid to call a senior partner or walk in a senior partner's office, or basically find a way to get their ideas across. We have to make sure that people realize that if you come forward with an idea, we may not adopt it, people may not agree with it, it may not be an idea that ultimately has traction, but you should absolutely feel that there will never be sort of any negative implication of coming forward with that idea.
Thinking about lawyers, I'm going to change tack slightly now. Kind of the lawyer of the future. I think for probably for as long as we've both been in the law, it's always been talked about that lawyers need to be more than just technical lawyers. They need to be able to relate to clients. They need to be able to have different soft skills. And obviously, as time's moved on, technology has begun to be something that lawyers need to embrace. How do you think that changes the way that we need to train our lawyers?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, it depends which era or which sort of time period you come from. Again, I might be embarrassing you here with revealing your age, but but if you recall, back when we were trainees, we didn't even have Blackberries. We basically if on kind of a Friday night, if the client didn't tell you had to be there over the weekend, then you would go home and you'd have your mobile phone, but you wouldn't have you wouldn't be able to get emails. So the client 9 times out of 10 couldn't reach you by until Monday. These days, if you started from that starting point, the biggest change would be iPhones and Blackberries and email on your phone. If you start from a younger generation, then for them they're taking it to a new level, which is they need to know how to obviously operate Excel. They need to be able to sort of run not models, but certainly be able to run basic math to test whether waterfalls and JV documents, for example, whether they work economically. You want to be able to basically run numbers through it. That's the ultimate litmus test. And then this next generation coming up, who would take that for granted, they need to be able to work, to effectively communicate over video conference, to be able to put presentations up on Zoom, etc. So I think it's a difficult question to answer because it depends which stage you started from. Because if I said to today's generation, one of the key technologies you've got to be trained on is you've got to be able to answer emails on your iPhone, I think I would get some strange looks. I think they would basically call me a granddad. But I think equally, the some of the changes that are happening now around video conferencing, probably in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, even the next generation coming up will take that as completely, just part of the background noise of their job. So it changes almost on a generational basis. I would say, to go back to the start of the answer, the job now from a connected perspective compared with where it was when we were practicing in London, it's unrecognizable, for good and for bad. The upside is you can stay in touch with your clients. Your clients can reach you very quickly. So you can always be available to them. The downside is you can stay in touch with your clients. They can always reach you and you're always available to them. So there are upsides and downsides to the technological revolution, but you can't deny that the technological revolution has happened in the legal industry.
And I guess the interesting reflection there is there might be things that we can learn from the generations that are following us, because actually there are certain things, particularly from a tech perspective, where they're going to do it so much better.
It's quite humbling the first time that happens, because you think you're quite tech savvy, and then you realize it's not because you're not good at something, it's because you didn't even know it existed. No question. We'll all learn from the younger folks, and it's good. I mean, it's definitely made things more efficient. No question about it.